Austrian painter, was a pretty bad guy. He entered the world on April 20th, 1889. Little did anyone know that this unassuming young child would grow up to become one of the most notorious real-life bad guys in human history. Let us explore his life story to discover how he became so bad. Hitler's childhood was marked by both tragedy and turmoil. His father, Alois Hitler, was a strict and authoritarian man who frequently clashed with his son. Adolf's mother, Clara, was a kind and loving presence in his life, but her death from breast cancer when he was just 18 deeply affected him. Growing up, Mr. H showed little interest in academic pursuits, preferring instead to daydream and doodle. It was during these formative years that he developed a fascination with art, harboring dreams of becoming a famous painter. However, his applications to art schools were rejected due to his disappointing art, and he was left disillusioned and bitter, possibly blaming Jews for his misfortunes. In 1907, at the age of 18, Hitler left his hometown of Linz and moved to Vienna, hoping to pursue his artistic ambitions. But life in the bustling capital proved to be a harsh reality check for the young, aspiring artist. He struggled to make ends meet, living in broke conditions and often going hungry. Despite taking on odd jobs to support himself, Hitler's dreams of artistic success remained elusive. It was in Vienna that Hitler was exposed to a toxic mix of nationalist and anti-Semitic ideologies that would shape his worldview for years to come. He became increasingly disillusioned with the multiculturalism of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and developed a fervent belief in the superiority of the Aryan race of blonde-haired, blue-eyed Germans. In 1913, Hitler left Vienna and moved to Munich, where he enlisted in the German army at the outbreak of World War I. It was during his time in the trenches that Hitler's fervent nationalism and anti-Semitic beliefs were further entrenched, as he blamed Jews and other perceived enemies for Germany's defeat. Hitler's experiences in Vienna and his failed artistic ambitions would play a crucial role in shaping his political ideology and fueling his desire for power. In the aftermath of World War I, Germany lay in ruins, crippled by economic collapse and political turmoil. It was in this chaotic landscape that Adolf Hitler emerged as a charismatic and divisive figure, ultimately rising to power and reshaping the course of history. Hitler's entry into politics can be traced back to the aftermath of the war when he joined the German Workers' Party, DAP, a small nationalist organization, in 1919. At the time, Germany was reeling from the humiliation of defeat in World War I, the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles, and the economic devastation of the Great Depression. Amidst this atmosphere of resentment and disillusionment, Hitler found a receptive audience for his fiery rhetoric and nationalist fervor. In 1920, Adolf's charisma and supposed charm won him the leadership of the DAP, which was soon renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, or Nazi Party for short. Under Hitler's charismatic leadership, the Nazi Party rapidly gained popularity, appealing to disaffected veterans, unemployed workers, and middle-class Germans disillusioned with the Weimar Republic. Hitler's rise to power was facilitated by a combination of factors, including economic turmoil, political instability, and the failures of the Weimar government. The hyperinflation of the early 1920s and the Wall Street crash of 1929 plunged Germany into economic chaos, leading to widespread unemployment and social unrest. In the eyes of many Germans, the Weimar Republic had failed to address their grievances and restore Germany's national pride. Amidst this turmoil, Hitler presented himself as a strong and decisive leader who promised to restore Germany to its former glory. His nationalist rhetoric, scapegoating of minorities, and appeals to racial purity struck a chord with many Germans who longed for a return to greatness. The Nazis exploited widespread discontent and fear, using propaganda, intimidation, and violence to consolidate their power and suppress dissent. By the early 1930s, Hitler's Nazi Party had become the largest political party in Germany, and in 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. The Nazis quickly seized control of the government, dismantled democratic institutions, and established a brutal dictatorship under Hitler's leadership. Hitler wasted no time in consolidating his power and dismantling Germany's fragile democracy. One of the pivotal events in Hitler's consolidation of power was the Reichstag fire of February 27, 1933. The fire, which destroyed the German parliament building, the Reichstag, was blamed on communist agitators and served as a pretext for Hitler to suspend civil liberties and crack down on political opponents. In the wake of the fire, Hitler convinced President Hindenburg to issue the Reichstag Fire Decree, which suspended basic rights such as freedom of speech, press, and assembly, effectively paving the way for the establishment of a dictatorship. The Enabling Act, passed on March 23, 1933, further cemented Hitler's dictatorial powers. The act granted Hitler the authority to enact laws without the consent of the Reichstag, effectively making him a dictator. Under the guise of restoring order and stability, Hitler used the Enabling Act to suppress dissent, silence opposition, and consolidate Nazi control over all aspects of German society. The Night of the Long Knives, which took place on June 30, 1934, was another critical moment in Hitler's consolidation of power. During this brutal purge, Hitler ordered the execution of prominent members of the SA, Sturmabteilung, and other perceived enemies within the Nazi Party. The purge allowed Hitler to eliminate potential rivals and solidify his control over the party and the state. With these key events, Hitler established himself as an authoritarian ruler and transformed Germany into a totalitarian regime. Central to Nazi ideology was the belief in the superiority of the so-called Aryan race, a mythical and racially constructed notion that purported to represent the pinnacle of human civilization. According to Nazi ideology, Aryans were depicted as a master race destined to dominate and subjugate all others. At the core of Nazi ideology lay a virulent strain of anti-Semitism, the belief in the inherent inferiority of Jewish people and the need to eradicate them from society. Jews were scapegoated for Germany's social and economic woes, portrayed as parasites and subversives who threatened the purity and vitality of the Aryan race. This toxic ideology fueled a relentless campaign of persecution and violence against Jewish people, culminating in the horrors of the Holocaust. The implementation of Nazi policies reflected the extreme nature of Hitler's racist ideology. The Nuremberg Laws, enacted in 1935, stripped Jews of their citizenship and deprived them of basic rights, relegating them to second-class status in German society. These laws institutionalized discrimination and paved the way for further atrocities against Jewish people. Persecution of minorities extended beyond Jews to include Roma, gay folks, disabled people, and other marginalized groups deemed undesirable by the Nazis. These groups were subjected to forced sterilization, imprisonment, and extermination in the name of racial purity and eugenics. The suppression of dissent was a hallmark of Nazi rule, as Hitler and his regime sought to eliminate any opposition to their authoritarian rule. Political opponents, intellectuals, artists, and activists who dared to challenge the regime were ruthlessly silenced, imprisoned, or executed. The Gestapo, the secret police force of the Nazi regime, operated with impunity, terrorizing the population and crushing any hint of resistance. The implementation of Nazi ideology and policies unleashed a reign of terror and oppression that plunged Europe into darkness. The Holocaust, the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of others, stands as a chilling testament to the horrors of Nazi ideology and the depths of human depravity. Hitler's aggressive foreign policy began in earnest with the annexation of Austria, known as the Anschluss, in March 1938. Under the pretext of unifying the German-speaking peoples of Austria with the Reich, Hitler's forces marched unopposed into Austria, effectively annexing the country and bringing it under Nazi control. Emboldened by the success of the Anschluss, Hitler set his sights on Czechoslovakia, a sovereign nation with a sizable ethnic German population. In September 1938, at the Munich Conference, Britain and France capitulated to Hitler's demands and allowed the annexation of the Sudetenland, a border region of Czechoslovakia, in exchange for a promise of peace. However, Hitler's appetite for conquest was insatiable, and in March 1939, he violated the Munich Agreement by occupying the remainder of Czechoslovakia, effectively absorbing it into the expanding Nazi Empire. But it was Hitler's invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, that marked the beginning of World War II. In a flagrant violation of international law and diplomatic norms, Hitler's forces launched a devastating blitzkrieg, or lightning war, against Poland, overwhelming its defenses and unleashing a campaign of terror and destruction. The invasion of Poland was a ruthless and calculated act of aggression, designed to assert Nazi dominance in Europe and pave the way for further conquests. The invasion of Poland also marked the beginning of the Holocaust, the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of others deemed undesirable by the Nazis. Under the cover of war, Hitler's regime implemented a meticulously planned campaign of persecution, deportation, and extermination, culminating in the horrors of the Holocaust. As Hitler's military campaign spread across Europe, the world was plunged into a conflagration of unprecedented scale and brutality. The invasion of Poland was just the beginning of a conflict that would engulf the globe, leaving behind a trail of devastation and despair. The atrocities committed under Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime stand as some of the most horrific and barbaric crimes in human history, leaving an indelible stain on the collective conscience of humanity. In addition to the Holocaust, Hitler's regime perpetrated numerous other atrocities and crimes against humanity. The euthanasia program, known as Action T4, targeted disabled individuals deemed unfit for the Nazi vision of a racially pure society, resulting in the systematic murder of tens of thousands of people. Mass shootings of civilians, particularly in Eastern Europe, claimed the lives of millions more as Nazi death squads, known as Einsatzgruppen, carried out brutal massacres in occupied territories. The scale and horror of Nazi crimes are almost beyond comprehension, defying belief and understanding. The legacy of these atrocities continues to reverberate to this day, serving as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked hatred, bigotry, and tyranny. Hitler's downfall came with the Allied victory in World War II, as Allied forces launched a relentless campaign to defeat Nazi Germany and liberate Europe from tyranny. In the final days of the war, as Allied forces closed in on Berlin, Hitler retreated to his bunker beneath the streets of the city, where he ultimately killed himself on April 30th, 1945. With Hitler's death, the Nazis gave up, bringing an end to the reign of terror that had engulfed Europe for more than a decade. At the core of Hitler's personality were traits of narcissism, megalomania, and paranoia, which fueled his insatiable thirst for power and his delusions of grandeur. Hitler's narcissism manifested in his exaggerated sense of self-importance and his relentless pursuit of adulation and validation from others. He craved absolute loyalty and obedience from his followers, viewing himself as a messianic figure destined to lead Germany to greatness. This narcissistic worldview blinded Hitler to the realities of the world around him, leading him to dismiss dissenting voices and surround himself with sycophants who reinforced his delusions of grandeur. Megalomania, or an obsession with power and dominance, was another defining characteristic of Hitler's personality. He harbored grandiose ambitions of creating a vast empire that would dominate Europe and beyond, fueled by a sense of racial superiority and a fanatical belief in the righteousness of his cause. Hitler's megalomania drove him to pursue ever more ambitious military campaigns and expansionist policies, regardless of the human cost or the consequences for Germany and the world. Paranoia also plagued Hitler's psyche as he became increasingly distrustful and suspicious of those around him. He saw enemies and conspiracies everywhere, viewing even the slightest criticism or dissent as evidence of betrayal or treachery. This paranoia led Hitler to purge perceived threats within his inner circle, including longtime allies and friends, in a ruthless bid to maintain his grip on power. In addition to his psychological flaws, Hitler's reliance on drugs further exacerbated his erratic behavior and decision-making. Throughout his life, Hitler was known to abuse a cocktail of stimulants, including methamphetamine and opioids, which he used to combat fatigue, boost his energy levels, and maintain his frenetic pace of work. However, these drugs also had serious side effects, including insomnia, paranoia, and erratic mood swings, which only served to exacerbate Hitler's already unstable mental state. Adolf Hitler's legacy is one of unparalleled evil and destruction, leaving a dark stain on the pages of history that will never be forgotten. His reign of terror brought untold suffering and devastation to millions of innocent lives, leaving scars that still haunt the world to this day, with his main flaw being invading Poland. Dziękuję. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that bell, or the Austrian painter will be resurrected.